A 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, welcome back to Still We Persist. My name is Tamara and I use she and her pronouns. And I am here with Brandi Douglass. As we do with every episode, I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. What we now call Corvallis, Oregon, is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampinefu Band of Kalapuya. Today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. Awesome. Well, like I said, I'm here today with Brandi Douglass. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Brandi. I use she, they pronouns. I am currently the Assistant Director of Outreach in the Office of Institutional Diversity, but I've been at Oregon State for 8 years now. I started out in housing and all that fun stuff. Originally from Stillwater, Oklahoma, went to the other OSU, that's Orange and Black. Family still lives there, so yeah, that's a little bit.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about what brought you out to Oregon?
Oh, well, I was doing my master's degree in social justice ed at UMass Amherst, and I'd done that for 3 years, and I met some friends at Oregon State who are no longer at Oregon State, Terry Smith specifically, and he and I connected through a friend who you may know, Chris Hubanks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Chris and I have actually known each other for 11 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we worked at UMass, or went to school at UMass, and that's how we met, and I met Terry through Chris. And he told me about Oregon State. I came and did an interview, and the biggest thing I remember about Oregon State is it was a Sunday when I came into town for the interview on Monday, and there were people, there were students hanging out. I think the student legacy field had just kind of begun, and so students were playing soccer, people were around, and UMass, for better or for worse, it just ain't that university. Maybe it is now, but it was not when I was doing my grad work there. And so I was just like, wow, there are people who are interested in staying here on a weekend. This is a really special place. And so it also reminded me of my time at Oklahoma State, where you'd have students just around during the weekends. You wouldn't have to do anything big, just to hang out, go get like a smoothie, or go play soccer, or go see a movie, get pizza, whatever, and just be in community with each other.
Wow.
Yeah, so that really, it was between this and a school in Indiana that both offered me positions, but I decided to come here thinking, I was like, oh, maybe 3 years and then I'll figure it out, and here I am with 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But while you've been here, you've moved around the institution a bit too, right? A
little bit, yeah. So housing is the main piece. I was a resident director for a few years, and then I worked with Teresita Alvarez Cortez in diversity initiatives and programs for almost 4 years, and then I've been the last 3 years with the Office of Institutional Diversity. So, and that office itself is only
fairly new.
Fairly new. It's about 3.5 years old. So
yeah. I remember when I was here in undergrad and just became an LL for the Women and Gender Center, you taught my class with Cindy Conrad.
Oh my gosh, I loved that class. I was with you all in our, what are now known as DLAs, the students who work in the residence hall and do social justice education there. And so having that class, which was curated before Cindy got here by myself, Jeff Kinney, Teresita, and Miguel Ariano. Yeah, I think it was the 4 of us. Maybe I'm sure there's somebody else I'm missing. Had really talked about what social justice education and leadership could look like on campus, and knowing that the work that the LLs do and the work that the DLAs do in the halls and in our cultural centers was vital. And there has yet to be a class like it, probably now or ever. When Cindy and I taught that class, I love Cindy. And she brought in a new flavor for it, mainly because she has a background in academics and in teaching, and that is not my background. And so it was nice to work with someone who has that, and we can feed off of each other in that way.
I know for me, it was kind of like a foundational level for my like social justice practice. And I, like before that, I had worked in the cultural resource centers, but I feel like I never got that academic piece of it all, and stepping in and getting immersed in the theory and knowing the reason why behind doing things and having a deeper understanding of the systems that are in place and why we're working against them and how they're so interconnected and how we do the work was so helpful, because I feel like it's difficult to come into the cultural resource centers and we have this framework or idea of what we're supposed to be doing, but without that background knowledge and that foundation that class really gave me as an LL, I didn't know why I was doing it.
Oh, that's good to know, because that was the hope.
No, I think about it a lot, and I think in particular you all like had me do, or just not just me, but like the class, an exercise where we had to like choose a side.
Yep, I remember that.
And it was so like impactful for me, because not only did I have to choose a side of where I would stand if something popped up, but I had to have a reason, as opposed to just following the crowd and like, oh, everybody's gonna walk over here. I had to truly think about what's the impact on like the community, what's the impact on me, and why am I making this decision? And I think about that a lot as I go into leadership roles and into new spaces of where am I saying yes and where am I saying no, and what is my reasoning for that?
And also, like you had named the impact piece of that, especially not only just for you and the folks who are maybe like-minded, but also the folks who are maybe not so like-minded in that same way, but you know, have a different reason, have a different impact. How is that? The one thing I do remember about those types of activities are, how are we talking to each other? I may have walked across on an opposite thought process, opinion than you, and are we still cool? How are we going to talk to each other? Is this an impact that needs further discussion or dialogue, right? Or is it just like, well, you know, Brandi's over there because she has her reasons, and I don't need to explore more. You know, what is the impact of all those pieces? I don't remember if you were in this group or if it was a different group of where I had talked about a story of mine, of where when I was a student, we had some, like every student and university setting has had their protest. And so we had one around some students who had unfortunately used blackface and Confederate flags and nooses in a photo. And there were folks who protested, you know, obviously against those students, and were let go. And so the conversation was, if you knew that going in, would you continue to protest, or would you like say, I need to find another way, or not? I didn't say you need to find another way. I said or not. So protest or not protest, and knowing what impact could be a part of that, right? What does that do to someone financially, if it's a job that they cannot afford to lose? Are there other ways of protesting? And how could a university tell me what I should and shouldn't do when it comes to protesting, right? And so those are balanced pieces. Those are two values that are quite different from each other in some ways, and still need to be upheld. And so the hope in those activities, which I still do, either with students or with faculty and staff, are how do we have conversations with each other around these things, like understanding that both of those journeys are valid. Yeah, I think in those workshops or activities that we did, it kind of spoke to
the importance of not feeding into disposability culture without you all even naming like disposability culture. Because I don't know if I like at that moment in time could have even picked up on what you were saying or have recognized that that was bad. Because I think a lot of the times, like reflecting on my own social justice journey of where I was at in different time periods, I think as I look back and being in LL, I was like, why would I not want to like remove myself or remove someone who has a different idea than me, or who doesn't want to do social justice work in the same way that I think we should be doing social justice work. But that activity really forced me to think, like, there's many different ways we can get to the same end.
Right.
And we shouldn't be pushing people out or letting people go because they have a different thought process than I do.
Right. I mean, the end goal is still a socially just world, right? And how we get there is going to take so many more ways and thoughts and opinions. That's the whole point of social justice, is to have that vision that we can all live equitably, think equitably, live our lives the way we want to live without this, there's a few things, without a fear of being canceled, which has its pluses and minuses, right? Like, not to say that cancel culture, disposable culture isn't, I want to say valuable, that's not really the right word, isn't needed. Sometimes you kind of need that push to be like, oh, maybe I should rethink things. And how can that person still be brought back into the fold if that's the case? And at the same time, what social justice is really meant to do is to continue to be a process that is ever changing. There's a vision that is met, and then the vision's going to change, and therefore we should change with it. I think about, I mean, kind of the topic we were talking about, which was Afro-Futurism, but just speculative fiction and futurism in general, the vision of including science fiction that from an African-American, African lens is a vision, and then that vision is going to change because the authors are going to change, the artists are going to change, the music is going to change, and Afro-Futurism is going to look like something different. That goes with every single creative model ever made. Yeah. It should, at least.
Yeah. As you brought up Afro-Futurisms, would you mind defining it for our viewers?
Yeah, so, well, one, it was coined by a white author, which is...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, kind of interesting. And it was really just... I'm like, just like, no, what? In the 90s. And so a little bit of it, it's basically talking about kind of what I just named about science fiction, but through the lens of African diaspora and just African American history. And so you think of artists like Solange, you think of artists like Janelle Monáe, before either them, Erykah Badu. You think of writers like Octavia Butler. Specifically, her book, Beloved, if you've ever read it, like that is Afro-Futurism in a nutshell. N.K. Jemisin is another author that has been up and coming in that type of realm. Those are the folks. Movies like Black Panther. Those are the visions of Afro-Futurism. And so before any of them, there was before even the white author coined that. You can think of Parliament Funkadelic in the 70s. You can think of Sun Ra in the 70s. Oh my gosh,
I saw Sun Ra's like whole exhibition up at the Portland Art Museum.
When?
It was like back last year.
Oh. It was, so it's gone.
It's gone, but like it was so good. I just reminded me of that.
So if you're thinking about the original pieces of Afro-Futurism before this author coined it, and he coined it in the article because he was talking about Black in the future. Was the name of the article, and he was talking to Black authors and artists. So it's not like he just decided one day to coin it. No, it's not. There's no colonialism involved in this, I promise. But Sun Ra and Parliament Funkadelic were really kind of are really the like creators to me of that. But the name itself is coined by a white author.
How do you see the ways in which, or can we, fold in Afro-Futurisms to higher education and the work that's done at a university?
Well, I say this knowing that Afro-Futurism is steeped in Black African culture and lens. And so Afro-Futurism itself, through the creative lens, through how we look at policy, how we look at any of the work we do, we would need to come through it from a Black lens. That's separate from if we're talking about folks of color, multiracial, indigenous folks. Those two are separate pieces. And you can take the thought of creating works, creating literature, creating policies through the lens of marginalized folks and how that could be successful in building a future for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. That's just so beautiful
I know,
to me.
right?
Like, to me, that just seems like a pinnacle that I would love to reach. And I'm trying to figure out the ways in which we fold in like a queer of color critique. I was just talking with Cindy about this morning, or fold in Black feminist thought to our policy and to the work that we do on college campuses. Like, how do I have that lens of thinking at the front of my mind as I'm making decisions, even if cutie pop or women of color aren't in the room? Right. Which I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think about the work of OID. And so are you all thinking in this way of how are we folding in Afro-Futurisms or cutie pop thought or whatever when you go out to do the work you do?
I do think we are pulling in from the lens of folks who identify as marginalized on this campus and within our university system. I wouldn't fully describe it as Afro-Futurism in the way that even with Afro-Futurism, that vision has had to be deconstructed and constructed into something else. As an office, I feel like we're trying to get there. I think when I think of specifically the work that Jeff does in our education, myself and Scott Vigneault, we can easily take that piece. I think of it when we think about our bias response protocol. Not only the protocol, but the education we do with that is trying to come from a lens of working with the impacted party. We are ever changing how we show up in those spaces, how we care for the folks who have been impacted, which are majority marginalized folks, specifically students. And how we follow up, which is the hardest piece about it, because there's so many things that we can and cannot share. So, you know, there's still systems that we still have to work under, and that's why I'm thinking, oh, it's a little hard, because in Afro-Futurism and any speculative fiction, those systems can no longer exist because you're writing it that way, right? And so in the work that we do and the work that folks at this university do, they still have to maneuver through systems that were created long before they came to Oregon State, long before Oregon State became Oregon State, and long before Oregon became a state. Yeah.
What about in your personal practice?
In my personal practice, I would say the biggest thing is trying to create a community that I can thrive in. And so I think one of the ways that I do that is through, I have a brunch that I've been doing the last few years, specifically for, I don't know why I haven't invited you, graduate and faculty and staff, queer and trans, intersex folks of color. It's called Pay It No Mind Brunch. I've been doing it for 2 years. And just to be in community with those folks is like my family, basically. And so it's not a space to where we take over or like this is, you know, but it's a space that we're like, okay, we're going to be ourselves here. We're going to create the space that we needed to live how we want. In this moment, for this brunch, for these 2 hours, we're going to be ourselves. And it's not to say that they're not allowed to be themselves in other spaces. I don't know. But I wanted to create a space to where we can create that vision. And so that's probably one of the biggest ways personally that I've done that in the last couple years. It took me a long time. Instead, I've been here 8 years. And so in the last 2 have really kind of fulfilled that. Queer culture in general, as someone who identifies as pansexual, has had a profound effect on how I see myself and how things like Afro-Futurism play a stronger role in the communities and the vision and the space that I want to create with that lens. And so drag whenever I do drag, which is not that often anymore, but I try to come from a lens of Black thought and Black artists. I'd say I've been somewhat successful in that. When I want to do it on campus, I try to donate any of the money. Well, I don't try. I donated all the money, my tips or whatever, to a cause that is for underrepresented folks. I think that's a special way that I try to be involved personally that allows creativity to flow. I'm trying to think of anything that's not creative, because that's usually, when you ask personally, that's the one thing that I latch onto is how do I create spaces to where I can be creative in that lens.
I mean, I love that though. And I think it's really powerful too in the ways that, in my personal opinion, we've been stifled in our ability to like think and create in new ways, or ways that make sense for us. And specifically, I've been thinking a lot about marginalized communities or people of color, queer folks, and where we've been given the agency or the space or the free time to create, and how it's like reclaiming or taking up space when we are allowed, or we are like giving ourselves the permission to create in a new way. I think specifically about spending time with my partner, and like her and I are like, okay, we want to like get creative. We're gonna do something this weekend. This is it. But then we catch ourselves like getting stuck in, well, I'm not good at painting. I'm not good at whatever. Like, oh, I'm nervous to do embroidery. So how do we create? But trying to push back against that for ourselves, because I think it's also really important, because for me at least, I know when I'm writing or if I'm in a new space with a new medium, then it unlocks like a different part of my brain, and new thoughts and new questions that can bubble up to the surface that I've never thought of before, or I've never engaged with. Yeah,
and I think naming that about you and your partner not feeling like confident in, I feel that all the time. I mean, I felt it when I talked about, I was like, I don't know about this topic about Afro-Futurism. I'm not an expert in, I just enjoy it. And so, you know, what has society kind of built around that thinking, right? I get that a lot with dialogue. I'm not an expert in dialogue. I just happen to have some years of training in dialogue, and I work with faculty right now in our dialogue facilitation lab who be the first to say, I'm not an expert in this. I'm not an expert in this topic that I want to bring up. And I'm like, that's okay. You're not supposed to be. The fact is that you're wanting to push yourself and to see where others are. Like, we just dialogued about white supremacy culture last week. And it was two white identified facilitators who facilitate that dialogue. While they may have some understanding and are definitely embedded in it, it's not like a topic they are, you know, the most expert on. None of us are. And so being able to just wade in that and just feel what that looks like or feels like, what's coming up for you, is a lot of mindfulness, basically, that has to come into play. Even with the things that you are, you feel you are the expert on. Dialogue is something that I still feel like I need to wade in a little bit, because if I don't, I will feel very complacent, and I don't want to, specifically with dialogue. Or when acting is something I recently picked up. You're talking about embroidery and all the new stuff. Acting was something I recently picked up doing last year, and I love it. I like, it's one of the rare times where I say, like, I'm very good at it. I'm very good at acting, and I don't know how. Actually, that's not true. My dad and I had this conversation that he thinks it's from him, and I pretty much support that theory. That my dad's the charismatic one between him and my mother, and so I was like, I probably did pick it up from you, but I didn't act on it for a long time. I wanted to do it since I was in high school. And I never took that chance, never took the chance in college, never took the chance as a graduate student. I pushed myself because I was like, I want to do it. And I've had to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I had to, it's not really like pushing yourself, because you can push yourself and then you can like push back. I had to show myself some compassion. That this is going to be okay, and like the things that you're feeling right now are perfect. You're feeling nervous, You may never do it. That's fine. There'll be some day where you're just like, embroidery is the thing I'm gonna do. Yeah. And the compassionate part of you should be like, yeah, let's go do it. And you do it, and if you feel like, nah, that was, don't know why I did that. The compassionate part of you should say, well, you did it, and we can just move forward from that. And so just trying to keep in a moment, basically, is what I've been trying to do now, which is hard.
Yeah. Speak to me a little bit about what you love about acting.
Ooh, what do I love about acting? It's kind of funny because the roles I've taken at the Majestic Theater have been quite controversial. And so I don't know if it's that part I love about it, but I think I enjoy finding out who I can be as this character. So my first role was in The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, and this was last April. And I played Saint Monica. Now, Saint Monica is an actual saint, and like, from what I remember, had asked God to save her son, who's Saint Augustine, who is the father of the Catholic Church. And so she is kind of known as this strong woman who asked God to just really help her family. And this play takes a little bit of a twist of that, not just of that, just the story of Judas Iscariot in general, and just kind of flips it on his head a little bit. And so depending on your devoutness to Catholicism, it could be seen as a little bit of a blasphemous play. And we did get some feedback about that, and that was fine. But it was fun to be able to find something inside of me that I didn't really think I have access to, which is, I feel like I'm a strong woman, so it's not so much of that, but it's portraying it in a way as a mother. I'm not a mother. I do not plan on having children, and so to tap into that role, to tap into somebody that I've never met and will never meet, is intriguing to me, because that requires a lot of empathy and perspective taking, which is what I do in my work. And so to be able to do that and have fun. I also said a lot of cuss words, which was also interesting. I cuss anyway, but it's just also fun to see it on stage. So yeah, so between that and the roles that I've done since then, none of these people I've ever been in my life. And so it's just kind of fun. Yes, it's like taking on a role, but it's also getting to know a character, a person, in an empathetic way. And it's really just fantastic. And what I've learned, at least with the Majestic, is that they're an incredibly supportive group of people. They, specifically Jimbo Ivy, who's their theater supervisor, is really trying to push the envelope on getting more stories, folks of color, talking about lenses outside of white identified lenses into the Majestic a little bit more, and meeting readily success and some pushback as well, because it's something new. But I would say overall, I think that group, that family, that community wants to branch out more, because they do serve the city of Corvallis. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you think there's ways that Afro-Futurism is like connected to your love of acting? Or you bring it into your acting?
Well, it's hard, yes and no. So depending on the role, you can tell when roles are written for white people and not for people of color, but they are acted as such. And so in Judas Iscariot, pretty sure that was, I mean, the cast itself was multiracial, the original cast, I should say. And so I don't think there was like a thought process through that. When I was in Disgrace, it was specifically written as a black woman who's a lawyer. And so when I think about it from like a direct lens like that, yes, it's easy to bring it in. And so in spaces where the playwright wasn't thinking in a lens, it's a little difficult. It depends on a lot of variables, but specifically the director and the playwright. What I've been finding is currently it's harder to bring it into acting. I think I would have to bring it in myself personally, to be perfectly honest. And that's either writing a screenplay or directing one, which are thoughts I've had. They're kind of like over here, like I've started writing one, and then I was like, all right, we'll put you down for a little bit and we'll get back to you. But I don't think it's out of the realm. It's just there's a lot of variables that go into it.
Can we get a taste or like a teaser of what you're thinking about? Like,
I love it. So what I was thinking about was actually, oh gosh, I'm laughing at myself and saying this because I hate this genre, is romantic comedies. I absolutely can't stand.
Why?
Oh, it's so fake. I'm just not that person. So it'd probably be a romantic black comedy if I could make it, as in like very dark. But I was thinking about my dating life and how much of an interesting comedy it would be. And so that's kind of the realm I'm looking at right now, is like romantic comedy with a dark twist. No, nobody has died in real life from my dating experiences, but I mean,
I trust it, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd watch it. I'd go and see that. I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. And so where it started is that it's about this woman who is a librarian, because that was what I used to want to be when I was growing up.
Really?
Yeah, I loved libraries. I would go every day after school, do my homework, read books, all sorts of stuff. I don't get a chance to do that anymore. I really thought about being a librarian, but education itself was something I was always wanted to do. And so she's a librarian, and she's having a nice little kiki with her librarian friends. And she's single at this time, and so, but she's talking about love and bringing in the 4 loves of her life. And so the play would actually focus on the 4 loves. And maybe somebody meets a tragic end, I don't know yet, but yeah.
Well, first of all, in my brain, I've never thought of librarians having a kiki, so that's like a whole new realm of life.
I mean, real talk. Like at some point, they're gonna just be like, they have to. That thought has never crossed my mind. I don't know what I thought librarians were doing all day long, but they were not kikiing. I mean, I'm sure they have a lot. I would hate to talk to anybody at the Valley Library. It's like, we have no time to kiki, but you gotta have a little time. It doesn't have to be like all in one day. I mean, you have to have time to kiki. Jeff and I have time to kiki, like not a lot, but we make time.
Well, I think it's important too, right? Like
it's definitely
that
important.
Community building piece, the like getting things off of your chest, being with folks.
It's a good way to just check in. Like if you don't have anyone to kiki with, let me just look. If you don't have anyone to kiki with, come find me. I will kiki with you. Only because, to me, and to be able to, and it's not so much about the phrases of spilling tea and blah, 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 blah. It's a check-in. It's a check-in on how things are going for you, because that affects your work, right? That affects how you show up. I know it affects how I show up sometimes, and so to be able to, Jeff and I have it to where when we meet before we do maybe a workshop or a dialogue together, we set time and we're like, okay, we need some extra time because you know you and I are gonna kiki before before we get into the work, and so it's really good space to be able to do that. And, if librarians don't kiki, that's a lie. I know y'all do. Like,
that's a lie.
Like y'all kiki, I know you do. Just to be able to have that space, that's just such a mind clearing experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know, that you named it happens in professional spaces, and that it needs to happen for this like holistic view of people to do well in their work life. Like we can't separate who we are as we walk into our jobs on a day-to-day basis, and to create a space where you can feel comfortable in doing that, and to be working with people where you feel comfortable to do that.
Exactly.
Also is amazing.
Yeah, to be able to create that space is powerful. I can't speak for the entire university to say everyone at the university does that.
They're all kikiing.
They're all kikiing. I'm pretty sure that's not always happening. But what I would hope is that spaces can be created for for people to talk about other things other than work. It's really hard to do. I'm not gonna lie about that, especially when you're talking to folks who do not work in a university setting. But you should be able to. It should be a practice that we all try.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I feel like we talked about everything. Yes, me too. I've been trying to talk to Brandi for about 2 years now. So the fact that this is our check-in on film, and I'm so thankful for it because, I mean, Brandi's on my committee for grad school, and
it's fantastic.
I wanted you to be on my committee because I just look up to you, even if I'm not like in space with you. I know that you're doing really amazing things, and the fact that you walk into spaces and you, for me, I see like you being your authentic self, and that's something that I like aspire to be as I go into my professional career.
You're gonna make me cry, so
do it.
I know this should be the place where this is okay.
It's the crying table, but really, I'm so thankful. And even though our check-in is on video recording, that just means I can take it with me everywhere I go.
That means I'm gonna totally save it because I do watch your webcast. You all look like you're having an amazing time, so I appreciate you so much, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week, and I can't wait to see you all again. Bye.
Bye.